The tire blew on the worst stretch of the Lekki-Epe Expressway. Not near a filling station. Not near a mechanic's shop. Not near anything that could help. It blew on the elevated section where the concrete barriers rose on both sides like walls, and the traffic moved in the particular, indifferent way that Lagos traffic moves, fast, close, and completely without concern for anyone who has stopped being part of it. The sound was a single sharp crack, like something decisive had been said. And then the Mercedes listed hard to the left, and Mama Remi brought it to the shoulder with the controlled, unhurried competence of a woman who has been in difficult situations before and has learned that panic costs more than it saves. She sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel. Outside, the morning light was the color of warm metal, 7:43. She had a board meeting at 9. The Okafor Williams Holdings quarterly review, 43 shareholders, 3 agenda items, and a decision about the northern expansion that had been delayed twice already and could not be delayed a third time. She was the founder. She was the chairman. She was, as her executive assistant Priya liked to say, with the specific admiration of someone who has watched a person operate at altitude for 15 years, the reason the whole thing ran. She called Priya. Priya said, "I'll send the driver." She said, "How long?" Priya said, 40 minutes minimum. Traffic on the third mainland is... She said, "I'll handle it. Tell them I may be 10 minutes late." She ended the call and got out of the car. The expressway shoulder was narrow, and the sun was already doing what the Lagos sun does without apology, pressing down with the specific physical weight of heat that has nowhere to go. She was 62 years old. She wore a cream Ankara blazer and matching trousers that had been made for her by a woman in Surulere who charged more than most people's monthly salaries and was worth every naira. Her hair was natural, silver, pinned with a single gold clip. She wore small gold earrings and a watch that had been her mother's, and that she wore every day without exception, not as a statement, but as a continuity. She looked at the tire. It was completely flat. The rim was already kissing the concrete. She did not know how to change a tire. She had never needed to know. This was not a gap in her education that she had ever had cause to consider. She looked at the traffic. The traffic looked back with the absolute indifference of moving things. She was considering her options, all of which involved waiting, when she heard it. The sound of a vehicle decelerating. She looked in her mirror. A truck was pulling to the shoulder behind her. Old. White, once. Now the particular color that white vehicles go in Lagos when they have been working for a long time without rest. The front bumper was held in place with wire. There was a toolbox visible through the windshield, strapped to the passenger seat with a bungee cord that had been replaced so many times the original color was impossible to determine. The man who got out was perhaps 40. He wore a work shirt, the dark blue of engine oil and trousers that had been washed so many times the fabric had achieved a kind of peaceful exhaustion. His boots were steel-toed and had a history. He was not tall, but he carried himself with the specific settled quality of someone who occupies whatever space they are in without needing to announce it. He looked at her tire. He looked at her. He said, "You need help, Ma." It was not a question. It was an assessment. She said, "The tire." He nodded. He was already moving toward the back of his truck. She watched him open the toolbox. A real toolbox, not a kit, the kind that has been accumulated over years rather than purchased complete, and remove what he needed with the efficiency of someone who has done this enough times that the movements have stopped requiring thought. He said, without looking up, "Do you have a spare?" She said, "In the boot." He said, "Key?" She gave it to him. If you have ever stood on the side of a Lagos expressway at 7:45 in the morning in cream Ankara while a stranger fixed your tire with tools he carried in his own truck, stay with me. His name was Emeka Duru. He was 41 years old. He ran a one-man mobile mechanic operation. No workshop, no fixed address, Just a truck and a phone number written on a piece of laminated card that he handed to people he met. He had 2 daughters. His wife had left 4 years ago. Not dramatically. She had simply left, which was in some ways harder to explain to his daughters than drama would have been, because drama has edges you can point to, and this had none. He sent money every month. He saw the girls on Sundays when the drive from Mushin to Isale Echo was possible, which was not every Sunday. He had started the morning with 3,400 naira. He had stopped for fuel on the way out of Mushin. The fuel had cost 3,000 naira. He had 400 naira left. He had a job in Victoria Island at 9 o'clock. A fleet manager for a logistics company who had called him the previous evening about a cooling problem in one of their trucks. It was a good job. The kind of job that could become a relationship if he did it well. He had been doing this for 16 years. He knew which jobs became relationships and which ones were just jobs, and this had felt like the former. He had been on the expressway at 7:43 because he was always early. He had seen the Mercedes list to the shoulder, and he had pulled over without deciding to. There was no decision. A car had a problem. He had tools. The gap between those 2 facts did not require deliberation. He jacked the car. He removed the flat. He examined the spare. It was a good tire, barely used, the tire of a car that was always serviced on schedule, and mounted it with the methodical attention of someone for whom this was not a favor but a professional act, even when it was unrequested and uncompensated. Mama Remi watched him work. She was not a woman who watched things passively. She had built a company from a single import license and a rented desk in a shared office on Lagos Island in 1989, and she had done it by watching things with the specific, analytical attention of someone who knows that most of what matters is visible if you look at it correctly. She watched the way he worked, the absence of wasted movement, the way he checked things twice without being told to. The way he worked on the exposed shoulder of an expressway with the same focused attention he would have given a workshop, unhurried by the traffic, unconcerned with the heat, simply present with the problem in front of him. He was done in 11 minutes. He lowered the jack. He returned everything to his toolbox with the same economy of movement with which he had removed it. He closed the boot. He looked at the tire he had removed and said, "The sidewall failed, not the tread. Have your people look at the other 3. If one sidewall goes, the others are usually not far behind." She said, "Thank you." He said, "Yes, Ma." She opened her bag. She found her wallet. She said, "What do I owe you?" He looked at her. He said, "Nothing." She said, "That's not..." He said, "Safe journey, Ma." He was already walking back toward his truck. She said, "Wait." He stopped. She said, "I don't accept nothing. Name a figure." He turned. He looked at her with the patient, direct expression of someone who has decided something and is not going to be moved from it by social pressure or by the particular authority that expensive clothes carry. He said, "You were stranded. I had the tools." He paused. That's all it was. She looked at him. He looked back. She said, "At least take my card. In case you need anything." He said, "I'm fine, Ma." He got in his truck. He pulled back into traffic with the unhurried confidence of someone who knows exactly where he is going and is not worried about arriving. Mama Remi stood on the shoulder for a moment, her card still in her hand. Then she got in her car and drove to her board meeting. She was 6 minutes late. She had never been late to a board meeting in 22 years. Priya met her at the elevator with a look that said several things simultaneously, none of which she said out loud. The boardroom smelled of imported coffee and the specific, pressurized air of a room full of people who have been waiting and are performing patience. 43 chairs, 3 agenda items, a decision about the northern expansion. She sat down. She opened her folder. She ran the meeting, but something sat in the back of her mind all morning, quiet and persistent. The way significant things sit when you haven't yet understood why they are significant. The man who wouldn't take her card. She had met a great many people in 40 years of building things. She had met people who took everything she offered, and people who took nothing because they were proud, and people who took nothing because they were calculating. She had developed, over those 40 years, the specific, accurate instinct of someone who has learned to read people at speed, because getting it wrong is expensive. This had been none of those. He had not taken her card because he genuinely did not need anything from her. That was not, in her experience, common. The meeting ended at 11:15. She had 2 calls after lunch and a site visit to the northern Lagos development at 3. She was back in the car by 11:30, Priya beside her with a tablet and 3 things that needed decisions before 5 o'clock. She said, "Priya." Priya said, "Yes, Ma." She said, "The man who helped me this morning, mobile mechanic. He was driving a white truck, old, Hilux, I think. Did you see him when you pulled up?" Priya said, "I saw the truck. It was still there when I arrived. I got the plate number." She paused. "I always get plate numbers." Mama Remi looked at her. Priya said, "You've been almost stranded before, Ma. I started doing it 3 years ago, just in case." Mama Remi said, "Find him." Priya did not ask why. In 15 years, she had learned that when Mama Remi said find something, the finding was the job, and the explanation would arrive in its own time. The truck's plate led to a name, Emeka Chukwudi Duru, and the name led to a phone number on a business listing that had been registered 7 years ago with the Corporate Affairs Commission under the name Duru Mobile Mechanics. The listing had an address in Mushin that turned out to be the compound where he had grown up and where his mother still lived. Priya had all of this by 2 o'clock. She was not expecting what came next, because Priya, who had worked for Mama Remi for 15 years and had watched her make decisions with the cool, logical precision of someone who trades in outcomes, was not prepared for the expression on Mama Remi's face when she read the name. It was not recognition exactly. It was something older than recognition. Something that had been filed away for a very long time in a place that was not often opened, and that had now been opened, not by choice, but by the specific, disorienting force of a coincidence so precise that it stops feeling like coincidence and starts feeling like something else entirely. She said, very quietly, "Chukwudi." Priya said, "Ma?" She said, his middle name, Chukwudi. Priya waited. Mama Remi set the tablet down on the seat between them. She looked out the window at the Lagos afternoon, the yellow buses and the hawkers and the generators and the enormous, indifferent business of a city that has always been too busy to concern itself with anyone's private reckoning. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "Cancel the 3 o'clock." Priya said, "The site visit?" She said, "Reschedule it for Thursday. And get me his number." Priya said, "Should I call him and—" She said, "No, give me the number. I'll call him myself." This was unusual. Mama Remi did not make her own calls, had not made her own calls in 15 years. Priya processed this without comment and wrote the number on a card and handed it over. Mama Remi held the card. She did not call immediately. She sat with it for several minutes, looking at it the way you look at something you have been waiting to find and are not certain you are ready for now that it is in front of you. In the front seat, her driver kept his eyes on the road with the practiced, professional discretion of someone who has learned that what happens in the back seat of this car is not his business and never will be. She dialed. It rang 3 times. He answered the way mechanics answer phones when they are in the middle of something. Direct, clipped, the voice of someone whose hands are occupied. He said, "Duru." She said, "Mr. Duru, my name is Remi Okafor Williams. You helped me this morning on the Lekki-Epe Expressway." A pause, brief. Then, "Yes, Ma. I remember." She said, "I'd like to meet with you, if you're available." Another pause. Longer this time. The pause of someone recalibrating, because this was not the kind of call that mobile mechanics received from women in cream Ankara on the Lekki Expressway. He said, "Is something wrong with the tire?" She said, "No, the tire is fine. I want to discuss something else." He said, "What kind of something else?" She said, "The kind that's better discussed in person." She paused. "I'll come to wherever is convenient for you." He said, "I'm in Victoria Island right now, finishing a job." She said, "I know a place on Adeola Odeku. Cafe. Do you know it?" He said, "I can find it." She said, "An hour?" He said, "An hour." She ended the call and sat back. Outside the window, Lagos moved with its usual total commitment to forward motion. But inside the car, something was very still. Priya said carefully, "Ma, should I?" She said, "No." She said it gently. "This one I do alone." Priya nodded. She had been with this woman for 15 years. She had learned, in those 15 years, the difference between the things Mama Remi needed help with and the things she needed to be left alone with. This was clearly the second kind. The cafe on Adeola Odeku was the kind of place that existed at the precise intersection of comfortable and neutral, not impressive enough to be intimidating, not casual enough to be dismissive. She arrived first. She ordered water and sat at a table near the window where she could see the entrance. She had not been nervous about a meeting in a very long time. She was not precisely nervous now, but her hands, which were usually still, were doing something on the tabletop. A small, rhythmic tapping, the index finger against the wood, 3 times, stop, 3 times, stop, that she noticed and made herself stop. He arrived 7 minutes after the hour. He had changed his shirt. Same style, dark work shirt, the kind that comes in packs, but clean. He had washed his hands, but the oil in the creases of his knuckles remained, the way it always remains, the mark of the work that does not come off with soap. He looked around the cafe with the alert, assessing look of someone who does not usually sit in places like this, not with suspicion, but with the honest awareness of someone entering a space that was not designed for them. He saw her. He came to the table. He said, "Ma." She said, "Sit down, Mr. Duru. Thank you for coming." He sat. He held himself straight, not stiff, the posture of someone who has dignity without performance, who does not need to adjust themselves for the space they are in. She looked at him across the table. In the morning, on the expressway, she had been focused on the situation, the flat tire, the board meeting, the time. She had not looked at him the way she was looking at him now. Now, in the cafe light, with no urgency between them, she looked at his face. She looked at his hands. She looked at the way he held himself. And something in her chest did the thing it had been doing since Priya read her his name in the car. That specific, involuntary movement of the heart that happens when something you have been not thinking about for a very long time suddenly arrives in front of you and demands to be thought about. She said, "How long have you been a mechanic?" He said, 16 years. She said, "And before?" He said, "I wanted to be an engineer." He said it simply, without bitterness, the way you state facts that have been lived with long enough to stop being painful. "My father died when I was 19. I came back from school to help my mother." He paused. "I found I was better with my hands than with the classroom anyway." She said, "Where are you from originally?" He said, "Anambra, Niue side." She was very still. He noticed. He said, "Ma, is everything—" She said, "Your father. What was his name?" He looked at her. The question was unusual. The tone was unusual. Something in his expression shifted. Not alarm, but attention, the specific quality of attention that arrives when a conversation turns in a direction you were not expecting. He said, "Chukwudi Duru." "Why?" The cafe was quiet around them. Somewhere behind the counter, a machine made a sound. A couple at the next table spoke to each other in low voices. Outside, Lagos continued. Mama Remi picked up her water glass, put it down without drinking. She looked at this man, 41 years old, work shirt, oil in his knuckles, 400 naira in his pocket that morning when he stopped to help her, and she said the thing she had been holding since the car. She said, "I knew your father." He looked at her. She said, "A long time ago, before you were born." The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had not yet been said, full of the specific heavy weight of a sentence that has opened a door that cannot be closed again. He said, "How?" She said, "That is what I came to tell you." She looked at him steadily, "And it is going to take some time." She paused. "I hope you don't have somewhere to be." He looked at her. He looked at this woman in her cream blazer and her gold earrings and her silver hair. This woman whose tire he had fixed with his last money on the expressway that morning. This woman who had tried to pay him and he had refused. This woman who had somehow found his number and asked him to a cafe on Adeola Odeku and was now sitting across from him saying she knew his father. He said, "I have time." And outside, on the Lagos afternoon street, a generator somewhere started up with the particular, purposeful roar of something that has been waiting and has now decided to begin. She did not begin with the beginning. She began, instead, with a place. She said, "There was a compound in Newi, on the road that goes toward Nobi, a blue gate with a mango tree so large the roots had lifted the concrete on one side. Do you know it?" He looked at her. He said, "That was my grandmother's compound." She said, "Yes." She looked at her water glass. "I know because I spent 3 months there. In 1982, I was 22 years old, and I had just finished my accounting degree at the University of Lagos, and I had come to Niue with a friend whose family was from there." She paused. "Your father was 24. He was studying engineering at the Polytechnic. He had a motorcycle. He knew every road in that town." Emeka sat very still. She said, "We were together for those 3 months, not secretly. His mother knew. My friend knew. It was—" She stopped. "It was one of those things that happens when you are 22, and the world feels like it has more room in it than it actually does." She looked at him directly. "When I left to go back to Lagos, I was carrying something I didn't tell him about. The cafe was very quiet around them." He said, "What did you not tell him?" She said, "That I was pregnant." The word landed in the space between them and stayed there. He did not move. His face did not change in the dramatic way that faces sometimes change in the presence of large information. It did the more honest thing. It went still, the way still water goes still when something has entered it and the surface has not yet responded. She said, "I was 22. I had a degree and no job, and a mother who had raised me alone and who had told me, more than once, in the specific way that certain mothers tell their daughters things, that the worst thing a woman could do was to arrive at a man's door with a problem he did not make himself." She paused. "I know what that sounds like now. I knew what it sounded like then. But I was 22, and I was afraid, and I made the decision that frightened people make, which is the decision that removes the most immediate source of fear without considering what it costs." He said, "You didn't tell him." She said, "I went back to Lagos. I told my mother. She arranged everything. The kind of everything that women in 1982 arranged when their daughters came home from Niue, carrying something they weren't supposed to be carrying." She paused, but it was twins. She said it without looking away, and one of them— She stopped. One of them survived. Emeka looked at her. She said, "I gave him to a family in Ikoyi. A good family, a teacher and a civil servant, people who had been trying for years. I had met the wife through my mother's church. I knew what kind of home it was." She paused. I told myself it was the right thing. For a long time I told myself it was the right thing. He said very quietly, "And the other one?" She said, "Did not survive." She said it with the flatness of something that has been grieved so completely that the grief has become part of the structure rather than something that sits on top of it. She was born first. She lived for 9 days. She said nothing more about it. The cafe moved around them. Cups, voices, the machine behind the counter, the street outside. All of it continued with complete indifference to what was happening at this table. He said, "You never told my father." She said, "I went back to Nui once. 8 months later, I don't know what I intended to do." She paused. He had moved. His mother told me he had gone to Onitsha for work. She didn't have an address. She paused again. I left. I told myself it was a sign, that the door was closed and I should not stand outside it. He said, he came back to Nui eventually. She said, "I know. I found out years later. By then I had built something here in Lagos. By then there was a company and a board and 43 shareholders and all the things that make it easier to decide that the past is the past." She looked at him steadily. I told myself he had his life. I told myself the boy in Ikoyi had his life. I told myself it was done. He said, "But it wasn't." She said, "No." She said it simply, "It never is." He leaned back in his chair. He looked at the table. He looked at his hands. The hands with the oil in the knuckles, the hands that had changed her tire that morning with the tools he carried in a truck held together by wire. And he was quiet for a long time, with a quality of quietness that was not absence, but presence. The specific presence of someone processing something that is too large to be processed quickly. He said, "The boy in Ikoyi." She said, "Yes." He said, "What happened to him?" She said, "He is 39 years old. His name is Kolade. He works in finance. He has a wife and 2 children." He looked up at her. "He does not know about me. He knows he was adopted. His parents told him when he was 12. But the records from 1983 were..." She paused. "Incomplete is the polite word. He has never been able to find his biological mother." Emeka said, "But you know where he is." She said, "I have known where he is for 11 years. He looked at her. She said, "I hired someone, a private investigator, in 2013. I told myself I just wanted to know he was safe." She paused. "He was safe. He was doing well. He had a good life." She looked at her hands. "I told myself that was enough. That showing up would only disturb something that had settled." She stopped. "I have been telling myself things for 40 years, Mr. Duru. I have gotten very good at it." He said, "Why are you telling me this now?" She looked at him across the table. She said, "Because this morning, you stopped on the side of the Lekki Expressway with 400 naira in your pocket, and you changed my tire, and you refused to take anything for it." She paused. "And your name is Emeka Chukwudi Duru, and your father's name was Chukwudi, and you are from Newi." She held his gaze. "I have been building things for 40 years. I know when a coincidence is not a coincidence." He said, "What do you want from me?" She said, "Nothing." She said it with the clean directness of someone who has thought about this very carefully. "I want to give you something." She opened her bag. She removed an envelope. She placed it on the table between them. "Inside that is everything I know about your brother. His address, his work, his family." She paused. "What you do with it is your decision. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I am telling you the truth, because you are 41 years old and you have a brother you don't know exists, and that is not right." She looked at the envelope. "It has not been right for a long time." He looked at the envelope. He did not touch it. He said, "My father." "Did he ever?" She said, I don't know. I don't know what he knew or didn't know. I don't know if his mother told him I'd come back. I don't know if he looked for me. She paused. Your father died in 2009. I read about it. A road accident outside Onitsha. She said it with the quiet of someone saying something that cost something to say. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't do anything. But I am. He was quiet. Outside, a car horn sounded. Then another. Then the particular Lagos symphony of horns that meant something had stopped moving somewhere, and everyone behind it had opinions about this. It lasted 30 seconds, and then resolved, and the street returned to its usual noise. He said, "Why did you come yourself, this morning when you called me? Why not send someone?" She said, "Because I have been sending someone for 40 years. She said it with the specific honesty of a person who has understood something about themselves that they did not find comfortable to understand. I sent a private investigator to find your brother. I sent money through intermediaries to your father's village after he died. For the compound repairs, I was told it was needed." She paused. "I have been managing this from a distance for 40 years. She looked at him. "You fixed my tire this morning, with your last money, and you refused to take anything from me. I thought—" She stopped. "I thought that was the kind of person who deserved to be told the truth directly. By the person who has been carrying it." Emeka looked at this woman. He looked at her the way he had looked at the tire that morning, with the specific professional attention of someone assessing a situation clearly, without adding to it what wasn't there, and without subtracting what was. He saw a woman who was 62 years old and had built something very large, and had been carrying something very heavy alongside it for the entirety of the building. He saw a woman who was not performing remorse, who was simply finally in the same room as the thing she had been managing from a distance. He said, "My mother. Does she know any of this?" She said, "No." He said, "My father never told her about you." She said, "I don't know what he told her. I don't know what he knew to tell." He picked up the envelope. He held it for a moment without opening it. Then he put it in his shirt pocket, the same pocket where he kept the laminated card with his phone number, and sat back. He said, "I need time." She said, "Of course." He said, "This is—" He stopped. He looked for the word and did not find it, and so he said simply, "This is very large." She said yes. She said it with the weight of someone for whom the largeness of it was not new information. "I know." He said, "The brother. Kolade. Does he know about me?" She said, "No. He knows nothing about any of this." He said, "He has been living his whole life not knowing he has a twin." She said, "A half-brother." She corrected it gently. "Different mothers, same father." He looked at her. He said, "Same mother too." He said it without accusation, as a fact. She received it as a fact. She said, "Yes, same mother too." The word mother sat between them in the way that certain words sit, occupying more space than their syllables. He said, "What do you want to happen with all of this?" She said, "I told you, I want nothing from you." He said, "I'm not asking what you want from me. I'm asking what you want to happen." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want Kolade to know where he comes from. I want you to know you have a brother. I want—" She stopped. "I am 62 years old." She said it not as a complaint, but as a fact that had become relevant. "I have built something. I have been building it for 40 years, and there is no one." She paused. She collected herself with the specific, practiced efficiency of a woman who does not allow herself to lose composure in front of other people, and who is currently at the edge of that practice. There is no one to leave it to who means something. She said it plainly. "I have shareholders. I have a board. I have Priya who has been with me 15 years. I do not have—" She stopped again. He waited. She said, I'm not asking you to be my son. I'm not asking Kolada to be my son. I gave up that right a long time ago, and I know it. She looked at him steadily. But I am asking. She paused. I am asking to stop managing this from a distance. I'm asking to be in the same room as it. He said, You're already in the room. She looked at him. He said, You're sitting across the table from me in a cafe on Adeola Odeku, telling me I have a brother. He said it simply. You're already in the room. Something shifted in her face. Not dramatically. A small movement. The specific movement that happens when a person has been holding something with great effort for a very long time and has just been given permission, or has given themselves permission, to set it down. She said, Yes. She said it quietly. I suppose I am. He stood up. She looked up at him, uncertain. The specific uncertainty of someone who does not know whether what they have said has been enough, whether it has been received, whether the thing they have just done was the right thing, or simply the thing they were finally willing to do. He said, I'm going to read what's in this envelope. He touched his shirt pocket. And I'm going to think about it. He paused. And then I'm going to call you. She said, Okay. He said, I can't tell you what I'll decide. I can't tell you what Khaled will decide if I find a way to talk to him. He looked at her. But I'll call you. She said, That's enough. He said, And Ma? He stopped. She waited. He said, The tire. He said it without irony. You should have all 4 checked, not just the spare. She nodded. He said, Sidewall failures on Lagos roads usually come from the shoulders, the concrete edge. If you drive on the shoulder even once, just once, it starts a split you can't see. He paused. Have your driver checked them before the weekend? She looked at him. He said, I'm a mechanic, Ma. That's what I know. He left the cafe. She sat alone at the table for a long time. The water in her glass was warm. Outside, Lagos continued its total, unsentimental business. Priya would be outside in the car, waiting with her tablet and her 3 decisions that needed to be made before 5 o'clock. The northern expansion, the board, the 43 shareholders. All of it would wait another few minutes. She sat with her hands flat on the table and looked at the empty chair across from her, and thought about a mango tree in Ninewi that had lifted the concrete with its roots. About a 22-year-old woman who had been afraid. About a man on a motorcycle who had known every road in a town she'd only visited once and never forgotten. About 2 boys, one given away, one never known, who had both grown into men without her, which was what she had chosen, and which had turned out to cost exactly as much as she had always known it would cost, and had been paying in the specific quiet way that certain costs are paid, ever since. She called Priya. Priya said, I'm outside, Ma. Ready when you are. She said, Give me 5 more minutes. Priya said, Of course. She ended the call. She finished her water. She looked at the empty chair one more time. 3 weeks later, Emeka called. He said, I talked to Kalade. She said nothing. She waited. He said, It took me 2 weeks to figure out how to say it. I drove past his office building 4 times before I went in. He paused. He took a breath. He's a quiet man. Like my father was, from what my mother says. He didn't say much when I told him. He just listened. And then he said, Does she know about me? She said, What did you tell him? He said, I told him you had known for 11 years. He paused. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said, Does she want to meet? She said, Yes. She said it without hesitation. Yes, whenever he's ready. Wherever he wants, whatever he needs it to look like. He said, he wants it to be somewhere ordinary, not a restaurant, not an office. He said, he paused. He said he doesn't want it to feel like a meeting. She said, Tell me where. He said, There's a park in Lekki, Phase 1. He takes his children there on Saturday mornings. He said, if you want to come, just come. He'll be there from 9. She said, I'll be there. He said, Ma. He paused. He said he's not angry. He said he doesn't know what he feels yet. But he's not angry. She said, I know. He said, I don't know what this becomes. Any of it. She said, neither do I. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, but I'll be there too. On Saturday. She said, thank you, Emeka. He said, I changed your tire, Ma. He said it with the specific, dry precision of a man who has found, in the course of 3 weeks, a small piece of humor in a very large thing. That's how this started. I'm just finishing the job. She almost smiled. She said, you should send me an invoice for that tire. He said, I told you. It was nothing. She said, it was not nothing. A pause. He said, no. He said it quietly, with the weight of someone who has understood, in the past 3 weeks, exactly how much it was. No, I suppose it wasn't. On Saturday morning, Remi Okafor-Williams drove herself to the park in Lekki Phase 1. No driver, no Priya, no board. She wore a simple dress, blue cotton, the kind of dress that does not make a statement because it is not trying to. She wore her mother's watch. She wore the small gold earrings. She arrived at 8:55. She found a bench near the gate where she could see the entrance without being immediately visible from it. She sat. At 9:03, a man came through the gate holding the hand of a small girl, perhaps 5 years old, who was carrying a red ball and had already identified something in the park that required her immediate and total attention. Behind them, a woman, his wife, holding a younger child on her hip, speaking to the child about the ball, about the park, about something the child found more interesting than anything she was saying. An ordinary Saturday morning family arriving at a park. The man, Kolaid, was 39 years old. He had his father's jaw. He had her eyes. She had known she would see herself in him. She had been preparing for it for 3 weeks. She was not prepared for it. She sat very still on the bench and looked at this man she had last seen when he was 9 days old. His brother, not him, but she had seen them both in that terrible, necessary week. And she understood, in the complete and total way, that you understand things that have been true for a long time before you were ready to understand them, that the distance she had maintained had not protected anyone. Not him. Not Emeka. Not herself. It had only made the distance. Emeka arrived 2 minutes later. He came through the gate in his work clothes. He had clearly come from somewhere, or was going somewhere, or simply was always in his work clothes, because that was who he was. He saw her on the bench. He walked to her and sat beside her without saying anything. They sat together. Across the park, Kolaid had crouched down to help his daughter with the red ball. He had not yet looked toward the gate. Emeka said quietly, "He knows you're here. I told him what you look like." She said, "Okay," he said. "He'll come when he's ready." She said, "I know." They sat in the Saturday morning park, the mechanic who had stopped on the expressway with his last money, and the woman who had been building and carrying in equal measure for 40 years, and they waited together with the specific shared patience of people who understand that some things cannot be rushed, only arrived at, and that arriving at them is itself the thing, the whole of the thing, the beginning of everything that comes after. Across the park, Kolaid stood up. He said something to his wife. She looked toward the bench, a brief, assessing look, the look of a woman who has been told something and is now seeing it. And she nodded. He turned. He walked across the park toward the bench, with the unhurried, steady walk of a man who has decided something and is not second-guessing the decision. Remi stood up. If you have ever stood in a park on a Saturday morning and understood that something that has been wrong for 40 years is about to begin the long, imperfect, necessary work of becoming right, subscribe to Tales of Tears, African and Ring the Bell, Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that it is never too late to stop managing from a distance and step into the room. Leave a comment telling us the moment that stayed with you. We are here every week with the next story, the next truth, the next door that someone finally decides to walk through.